It's quite different.
I'm missing.
All right, before we get into what we're doing today, let's just make sure everybody has the right handouts. Okay, so in addition to a draft policy document, you should each have a map titled Lands of Conservation Value with writing all over it, that I drew all over it. One that says map 9, Natural Resources Parcel Rating.
Yep.
Map 8, Agricultural Soils Rating. Wildlife Corridors. And protected agricultural lands, and it says Comprehensive Plan 2021. If you don't have one of each, there's probably the ones you're missing down at the end.
Left over.
And I did,
Conservation value.
I printed an agenda, but I don't know if it actually came out of the printer, but that's okay. Apologize, I didn't get here till about 9:45 this morning. I had a kid to drop off at work and
These are ours,
all
right?
sorts of fun stuff. Yes,
I can write
you
on
can write on them, you can do whatever you want. Okay, so, and then you should have a copy that says draft.
I got them all now.
Do you?
I can send them down to Kim. There's an extra
Yeah,
too.
there should be a whole extra set that you can,
So I need that too.
there should be 5 maps, so there's, so in all of that, I didn't actually print the agenda, so I'm sorry.
Exactly where it is. Ken Keating's my friend who lives kind of adjacent to the.
But there really was only one thing, 2 things on the agenda, so that's okay. We'll survive
The
without
maps
it.
in the draft.
Yep, that's exactly it. Okay, thank
We'll
you.
figure it out.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for being so flexible with all the rescheduling and cancellations. It's fun to be a parent with young children and have things coming up all summer long.
Remember the dates.
School starts again in a few weeks, though, so things should settle down. So the maps you have was going to be our main topic for our July meeting that we ended up having to cancel. And so these are, when I went through every map, yeah.
Can we introduce everybody?
Yes, we can
I
do
don't
that,
know
sorry.
everybody.
We've done, it's been a while since we've met, and I think we only did introductions the very first time. Why don't we start with you?
I'm Shannon Chevier. I'm the new alternate on the zoning board.
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kim Burkhardt, I'm on the ECB.
Gary Kokersberger, I'm also on the ECB.
Chuck Euler, Planning Board.
Eric Obenauer, ECB and Tree Team.
Tom Schwartz, I don't know,
Jeff.
former planning board guy.
Karen Parkhurst. That's why I'm on 4 or 5 committees.
Yeah. And the 2 of you were on, or at least you, were you also on the old conservation easement team
Yes.
when we were getting
Yes.
started with it during COVID, I think, and we worked on subdivision? Yeah, I thought so. All right. We don't have anyone via Zoom today, okay. So the agenda I was going to print out for you has, and it's in the same email, but it has the list of these maps and kind of a description of each of them, but I'll go through them. And then we have one more thing to discuss, and that's the draft document. We won't go through it line by line, but I just wanted you to have a copy. So the maps. As you all know, we have a lot of planning documents that cover the town, and we have more than one that covers topics that this group is interested in: conservation, protecting soils, the kinds of natural resources we should be interested in. We also have the map that we like to point out on this wall, which you have a copy, the Lands of Conservation Value. That was from our open space plan. The soil ratings map shows all of our quote unquote valuable soils in the town. And something I've noticed about all of these maps is they don't all agree on, hey, what should we protect? What's the most important and why? And part of that is because they're each focusing on something different. Naturally, the soils map's gonna look different than, the watershed map and stuff like that. But at some point, this team's going to be tasked with answering the question, hey, should we buy this parcel or not? or someone has come to us with, willingness to donate an easement. Do we want to take that on? And, when we've had those questions before, and this is what we do. We pull out all the maps and we typically pull that one out, but I feel like it misses a lot of things. And one of the best examples is the map titled Natural Resources, which really focuses on water. And the darker colors are the higher value for conservation in both of those maps, which is why I find it interesting to compare the two. They don't agree at all. You look at the darker parcels on the lands of conservation value, and you look at the darker parcels on map 9 natural resources rating, and they're not in the same spot. Now, some of the rankings that went into creating the lands of conservation value do include streams and, proximity to water, but I really felt like I thought it was worth it to give everybody copies of all these maps and kind of sit down and look at it and ask ourselves, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to map it? Or do we need separate maps? And do we have to answer and ask questions separately each time we come across a parcel or, a potential project? And so when I printed these out for myself, I just started sitting down and looking at them, and you'll see I did scribble all over the natural resources map, because that one focuses mostly on water, stream corridors, wetlands, and the lake. But you'll see it has a lot of white area that's not included. It's because this map was part of our agricultural enhancement plan, and so it only considered actively farmed parcels at the time. You'll see my little note. It says, as of 2016, they only calculated it for farmed parcels. So again, this map actually is still missing some pieces, but you can get the general idea. So that's our conundrum. How do we, or can we, I guess is the first question, could we make a map that's more of a one answer to all the questions? If you had X amount of dollars, what would you protect? Now, some people might say it's this lands of conservation value map. And that's a good answer, but it brings up another question, and you've heard me say it before, is, well, it ignores stream corridors and other parcels that are important because of where they are. It looks more at what can you get for, the biggest bang for your buck. Large acreage together in one spot that also happens to have other natural resources or things that we want to protect, like steep slopes or land cover types. So it takes this parcel rating or lands of conservation value map takes some of these other things into account, but I think it loses some things, because as you'll see, some of these areas where some of these other maps say we have great soils, or we have a lot of water running through them, are not dark blue on that map. And then sometimes I wonder, well, just because it's small doesn't mean it's not important.
Especially if you're talking like the wildlife corridors.
Right, and then that map is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
The only trouble I have with the wildlife corridor map is it's extremely outdated. The data for land cover for our area was last calculated by students at FLCC like 20 years ago. So now,
I remember
20
filling
years,
that out 20 years ago.
a lot of farmland is still farmland, but some of it's not. Some of it's houses, and same with forest land. Some of it may not be there anymore, but it's what we have, so it's all we have to go off of right now. I didn't really talk about this other map.
It'd be helpful if the wildlife corridor map could be superimposed
Right.
on the conservation value
Yeah, these are the
or
kinds of
natural
questions I have.
source, because it doesn't follow any of these other
Right.
maps, so it's hard to say which parcels are, the parcels are clearly defined. They're not as clearly defined here.
They are very faint.
Mhm.
They are there, the parcel boundaries,
Yeah.
but it does make it hard to see because the parcel boundaries are underneath this land cover layer, and
Okay,
it
so
probably should be done the other way
I'm
around.
going to just briefly personalize this, because you have on the one that you drew all over, you have the Menteith Creek parcel here. Part of that is the Payne property, and I can easily see the Shotland property down there below the waterfall. But the property on the other side of the creek is not
Right.
carved. And actually, I'm looking to make that property into a conservation easement.
That's one of my points, is
So,
why is that considered
is-
unimportant? It's because
because
it's small.
it's-
That's why it didn't
It's
get a
only
higher
17
ranking.
acres, okay. So was there a limit on how much acreage was
No.
involved?
So it was weighted. So acres get, there's kind of a description, it's not the easiest thing to understand. At the bottom of the lands of conservation value map, that explains how the scoring was
Mhm.
done. So if you look at the bullets, it looked at each of those items, whether or not it had a natural land cover. Does it have steep slopes, so slopes greater than 15%? Is it a regulated wetland, as in, has it been mapped before? Is it an identified wetland area? Is it within 150 foot of a stream? And for our purposes, we typically use the streams that are, we call them blue line streams. They're mapped. Some of the streams that flow seasonally or only when it rains are not mapped. So these are, they
But
at
this is
least-
on Menteith Creek. In fact, it goes to the middle of the waterfall.
Oh, I know,
on
yeah.
Menteith Creek.
Yep, and whether or not the land is visible from Canandaigua Lake. They take all those factors,
Mhm.
and then it's weighted by how many acres each
Okay,
parcel
I
has.
see. So,
right?
so that's probably why.
Mhm. So that parcel is ranked down here in this light green, but if you were focusing on the fact that it's very close to the lake, it touches Menteith Creek, some would say, well, that should be dark blue, it should be one of the darkest.
And that's my feeling, that you'd have a greater chance of getting the Payne property. It's not Payne property anymore, but if you had both sides of the creek.
Right, yeah. And then, so like, I like this natural resources parcel rating map because it does focus on water, but again, it was made for our agricultural enhancement plan. So if the land wasn't being farmed, it wasn't included, and that parcel doesn't
Yeah,
even show.
It doesn't show, and that's why I was saying that.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure there's others. I mean, I'm intimately familiar with this parcel, and I'm sure there are others throughout the town that,
It's all in the eye of the beholder at the time somebody wants to
Right.
buy it or
Yeah.
develop it.
However, I
Whether
would-
you're a farmer or a hunter or a wildlife lover or a bird watcher.
I would argue, though, that we're a town on a lake that's really important to a lot of people, not just because, for this group's interest. I think any parcel that is up against a tributary of the lake is important to, be watching what happens to that parcel.
but this particular parcel also has a scenic view because
Yes,
it
it
goes to the
does.
top of the hill. And I know personally because there have been 4 people who got married up there,
Yeah.
and you can see all the way to the end of the lake.
Yep. Yeah, so you can see why I thought we should look at this. I don't know what the answer is, but I think they need work, and I have access to budgeted money that we can talk to Labella or someone else. My first thought is Labella because they made all these maps, they have all this data, to come up with maybe a better way to combine this information or to fill in missing information to make fewer than 5 maps for us when we were considering,
First thing yet
ranking.
is there a need to update any of the maps? Because you said the wildlife corridor is really.
So we can't update that unless someone goes back and redoes what they did 20 years ago.
What did they do? Do you have any idea how they came up with this?
I believe I got a postcard in the mail or
Tag year.
something like
Did
that.
you? Okay, so I don't know how they did it, but when I was in school, we used satellite data to do this because the infrared images push back different signatures for land cover, and you can use that data to say, well, that's a crop of corn, that's spruce forest, that's hardwood forest, that's shrubland, just based on the signature you get back from the infrared data. I'm sure they use that, and then also probably actually mailed stuff to landowners. Is this true? They call it ground truthing. You can't ground truth the entire county walking on foot, but you can mail letters to landowners. Is this really what you have here?
It was a FLCC,
Yeah.
they took it out. I wonder if they would be willing to make it more Sullivan, Yeah, who would help us with,
Well, I
spongy
mean-
moth. They would perhaps take something.
And
like
we
that.
could give them starting points. For one thing, look on both sides of the creek, not just one side, because there's no one-sided creek in this town. Or I don't,
For
it
the
just
land cover
seems that
stuff,
they
it would
have
be
to look wider.
comprehensive.
Yes.
Yeah, the land cover stuff would be fairly comprehensive. It's just basically what's there. What is it?
Yes,
Because then we only took like one piece of it to make this map. Does it have a natural land cover? So it's not a development, you can see all the
Right.
little, it's not, typically isn't the giant farm fields, stuff like that.
if you
But-
overlay that on this, the wildlife corridors, lands of conservation value, you're going to get much larger pieces
Yeah.
of conservation, potentially conserved land.
I would also like this one that focuses on water resources, updated for all parcels, not just agricultural parcels. Now, I mean, naturally, they did it that way because
Yeah.
of the plan, but.
Yeah, the Lobella just did what they were asked for.
Right,
Maybe we just
and
wanna
that's
ask
another
different
thing, is
questions.
sometimes we don't know,
What they
sometimes
asked
we
for.
realize later that
Until you
we
work
asked the
for
wrong
it.
question,
You have to work with the plans. you
We
have to
approved
do.
this map at the time, but we were focused,
Well, and I guess you call it the mythology, what do we call it? The
Mythology?
Mythology or whatever that Lobella used.
Methodology.
Methodology, there we go. It looked at the size of the parcel, it looked at adjacent to water, whether it's streams or waterfront and
Scenic overlook.
scenic and woodland as opposed to open and vacant and all that. But it was very finite, but it's not perfect, and I
So-
don't know how we get it perfect.
Here's another question, so this map, my main issue with it is that it's weighted by acreage.
It's size,
Right, size of the parcels, so naturally, the parcels that have a lot of these important things that are large are the ones that are dark blue, but like, some of them that are really important have great scenic views and stuff, like the Vista project.
Yes,
We all, agreed that that was important, and we said, yes, we will give you money to help you get that. And if it had been larger, it would have been a darker color, So here's a question is, do we ask Lobella to recreate this map but take away the weighting factor for size? I wonder what that would look like. Does that kind of cover some of these other things?
That
It
would
takes
be
into
interesting.
account the natural land cover, proximity to, water resources that drain to the lake. But it still takes into account,
A lot of times.
because it would also take into account
Excuse
wildlife
the-
corridors too.
it would, and also agricultural cover, because it's
Yes.
looking at, basically, is it not, it's not developed, it's not, or even like a golf course. It's either farmed or it's natural. Now, I kind of still like to see those separated, but. I don't know.
Suppose she still got it in her computer where she could just
She has everything.
Change-
Sometimes I reach out to her
change the
for
mix and say, okay,
questions.
forget about the size of the parcel, change the rating.
They can run any map analysis that we ask them to do, as long as they have the layer of data that we're asking about.
So we could then compile our own rating system based on the data we have in front of us and anything else we decide is important, and discount parcel size as an active variable. Give
Yeah.
them that data, whether the parcel is large or small, and have them then input that and come up with a map based on that ranking system. So a small parcel that scores highly in the areas, the variables we think is important, would be light blue or dark blue.
Right. And we still have this map if we, want to focus on the biggest bang for your buck.
Has the town historically acquired smaller parcels?
It just depends. I mean, we don't have very many parcels in the town that we hold an easement on or that we own that were purchased for the reasons we talk about. I mean, we just purchased one, right? So we
Right.
just bought one on County Road 21 next to McJanet Park. It was 7
Right.
acres.
Smaller, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But when this was developed, I guess the thought was we would probably much bigger parcels.
Some of it is because, last time we talked about the farmland protection programs, it used to be that those were, the money went to bigger farms. Naturally, you protect more. That's,
Yeah,
it's
and
that
more-
good,
More economically viable as farms, the bigger they are.
Now, Ag and Markets is even shifting a little bit, that 20-acre farm that has good soils and a house might be pretty valuable because they can have a farm stand and feed their neighbors, Those are the words from Ag and Markets. David Bain at Ag and Markets told me that they see that as highly valuable now. So,
Wow.
because they feel like that's the future of local food.
Yeah.
Not
They
to
moved
say-
into the 22nd century.
And they didn't replace the idea of protecting 600-acre farms. They're just adding that in and focusing more on that. They didn't always do that before.
So that would increase the scope of the requirements. It would add that to requirements that are purely ecological. That would add an economic dimension to it.
I might also go one step further, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but, this says natural or agricultural land cover. Now, there's the question, do you want agricultural land cover to be included? I say maybe yes, because it's
Or
still
at least
not,
delineate.
it's still not,
It's
a
open.
housing development. It's still open land, it still captures rainwater and stormwater, it's still, as long as it's farmed responsibly, and most of our farmers don't want to lose their soil, so, they try not to create erosion, they try to prevent it. So it's still better than a, housing development if you're just looking at preserving open spaces, but would there be a reason why you would want that separated?
It should be easy enough to different color code,
I think so.
not necessarily change the rating system. Factor them both into the rating system equally, but at least color code it, so when you're looking at it, you say.
Yeah,
oh,
I think
this
we
is-
gotta see what the rating system was in developing this map.
Right.
Okay, and then see, well, maybe.
Yeah, it's in the open space
it's
plan.
probably in the
There's,
scope of work.
they spent a lot of time going through this. It was back in 28.
Back then, I figured that was the priority, maybe steep slope had a priority over, floodplain or wetlands or something, but, now it might change, or you want to include more properties. The acreage factor isn't as important as it was when we thought about it back then.
Because for you, so planning board, because sometimes I think, well, you guys have all these resources too, and the ECB goes through all these, but wouldn't it be nice if you could just say, well, is it vulnerable? Let's look at it, does it have these
Or
features
how
or
vulnerable.
factors that we
had
need to
one the other night,
remember,
The Kewen farm up in Hickox. I mean, it was a moderate-sized farm, but he wants to subdivide into 3 lots.
Mhm.
Now, they're big lots, they're 10, 12 acre lots, but still, you're taking a farm that's, 20 some acres and cutting it into pieces.
Yep, yeah.
And is that just the beginning? Now, in that case, we got a deed restriction placed on it that you would no further subdivide, and that was the result of the ZBA imposing it as part of the variance. So there was some control there, but again, you're taking a large farm, which maybe a moderately large farm, and it had a certain value, and you're slicing it into 3
Right,
individual lots.
yeah, and Charlie already was impacted. He didn't plant that back part in anticipation of it because the owners wanted to build right away. But it's almost, fall, he probably could have planted it.
Mhm. So I mean, that wouldn't show up on the conservation plan.
No, I don't know if it would. It would show up as being a chunk of land with natural land cover.
Mhm.
And actually, that one in question is right there, and it's low, according to this one.
It's the, yeah.
What color is it? I'm sorry.
Yellow.
Yellow. So it's,
And then when the ag committee talked about it, they said the northern end didn't drain very well, but as they went south, the land got better and better, so, but it's all the same color on the map.
it's all one.
Yeah, the soils map for that one I remember, it was 80% prime soils.
Yeah, 84,
84, okay, yeah.
84% prime.
And I pointed that out on the comment sheet because we don't often get that, even though it was little.
But anyway, looking at the big picture, yeah, I think maybe we want to reassess what we have as far as the priorities.
Would it
Make
be,
sure
so it's easy for me just to reach out and call Barbara Johnston. She's the person we've had contact with the most at Labella. She's led the projects that we have that resulted in these maps. I could easily just call her and talk to her about what we said, or I can invite her to come and talk to us. It would take up another meeting, but if it's valuable, she also has the insight into the data behind the maps.
I was gonna say, she might be able to answer some of these questions, like, not off her head, but she'll have the data in front of her.
And she may have learned more since it, you know,
Yeah.
she did our project, she might have done other projects and realized that there's other factors you have to look at. I
No
see
matter
where you're
what, it won't be perfect because
Oh, no.
it won't capture something that we actually go out and look at and see, geez,
Right.
how the
No.
hell did we miss that one?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
That's a good point too. We can do all this work and make
And
this
it's
great
not
map we're
gonna be
proud of,
perfect.
and it's still gonna have missing pieces, because you can't map everything. You
Right.
wouldn't be able to read it if you mapped
Or you don't
everything.
make it so busy that.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to
can't
read it.
and
It would take you
or
10
wind up
minutes
with the
just to
whole town
decipher
is-
one parcel.
The whole town should be conserved.
Yeah, that would make it easy.
How you do it, that's where you get
Yeah,
into this.
other than the parcel up there in 21, is the town actively looking at any parcels, big or small?
Still looking at RSM.
And what?
RSM, the property on the lake, the little spit.
They didn't vote on that yet.
No, they're looking still. It's not over, but it's,
What's the temperature of the board, do we know?
It's probably around 0 degrees.
I mean, it's the last
I know.
parcel with 400 feet of frontage until you get to South Bristol
Exactly.
Line. There aren't any more.
No.
And every
Well,
survey we've had, it says give more lake
it's
access to
been
the
brought to my
system.
attention that the board thinks it will only benefit, well, in my opinion, it's a large amount of the population, because a large amount of the population of the town lives in the Morel development.
So they're paying
But
big
that's-
taxes.
Yeah, I agree.
They're entitled to access. If the less access there is, the more them and us.
I brought it up at the last town board meeting, and they said they promised that they would either address it at the next meeting, or they will have a special meeting to address it.
Okay.
It's
but,
very short-sighted. Once
it is very
that's
short-sighted.
gone, there is no more
Next to the German
parcels
project,
with that amount of frontage.
the south of German.
Where would that be on these maps?
So,
It's,
which one is it best to look at?
Find German brothers.
It's
or-
What's PDR, another part?
Just, well,
where's
Uh,
Whitehall's Road?
there's
can you find Whitehall's
There-
Yeah,
Road?
here's
there's
Whitehall's
Butler.
Road here, so it's probably right here.
Oh, yeah, because the parcels are already mapped, so it's this one right here.
Yep.
So if you look at the one I drew on, then it says Weifels PDR and it's red. If you go to the lake,
You go
and then there's
north.
like some yellow chunks, and then north of that, there's this
Squiggly line.
little squiggly
Okay,
circle
yep,
with
yep.
all these tiny little parcels.
Yeah,
That's the
RSM.
uplands portion of the parcel we called RSM, and then down on the lake, it's tiny. If you can
can't
see
tell.
it, there's a tiny little white strip.
So it's white.
400 and what,
It's-
something feet of
Yeah.
frontage.
Yeah, but you know, it's,
It's crappy frontage, but it's all we got left.
Right.
You know, it's, and, you know, I think it could be successful there, because something has happened with the marina down there, they seem to not want to park the boats on the side of the road anymore. Have
They're
you
doing a
noticed
lot
that?
nicer job.
They're doing an excellent job of it. On the weekends, it's vehicles only, but,
But they pull way the hell off the
And they
road.
They do.
widen the shoulders a little bit
They're-
too,
yeah.
which helps.
Okay.
so, it would make that piece of property much more accessible. And you know,
And
They have-
the easement going down from
Okay.
from the,
Lakewood.
from the Lakewood Meadows, that
I used to live
But
down here, so you-
the woman that lives right next door to that property
She said
spoke
she-
up
she
at the
was a
last
big favor
meeting.
of it.
Yes, and she said she was very much in favor of it.
It's remarkable.
Yeah,
You know,
To
how,
invite your next 100 best friends down to swim next door.
so all of us, if we agree we would like that property, please email Jared Simpson at townofcanandaigua.com.
But here's the case, white it has no reading, is that?
Well, it depends on
Because it's
which
too
map
small.
you're looking at.
Well, I'm looking
Why
at
it's
the
white.
conservation value.
Because-
The colors, and then that property is white.
Because it was little, either that or because
so small.
it's zoned differently.
No, I'm just saying, that could be a situation where it should be conserved, but it doesn't show on our map as a
Yeah,
property that
so
should
if
be.
this map were done the way
If you looked
we're
at this,
talking
you'd say,
about, every parcel that touches the lake would be dark blue. 'Cause
Yes,
it's right on the
exactly,
water.
exactly.
Every parcel that's along Menteith Creek or Sucker Brook or our other, main tributaries would be dark blue.
Assuming that
Maps with
being on
wetlands
the
on
lake
them.
is a high rating.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
should be. It's not to say you're gonna knock down houses by the lake, but when someone wants to do something down there, you need to, think about that.
But they do,
Everything
and
you
they do
impacts
knock
the
down
water.
houses by
They
the
do,
lake,
But they always build a new one.
But unfortunately, I know.
well, that
Usually
location,
bigger.
speaking as a paddler, there's few places to put our kayaks in.
Right.
And I'm convinced the more people have access to the lake and use the lake recreationally in a responsible way, like you leave no trace paddling, hiking, the more they'll come to care about the lake and the watershed.
Exactly.
So that, having that as a recreational access point would have a lot of dividends.
And
Yeah.
it's not gonna happen overnight, but for
Right.
crying out loud, you gotta start somewhere. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I think-
they've gotta
Don't let
start
it,
somewhere.
don't let it slip away and have somebody else.
Exactly.
And there's a
Yeah,
widespread
land back in.
sentiment among people, at least people I've talked to informally, it's all anecdotally, that this is a beautiful place to live, but gosh, we all wish that we could have more lake access.
Well, you show up at a town board meeting. Karen's the only guy that shows up.
When's the next one?
The 12th of September.
But the last time I spoke about it, I compared it to the Butler Road property. And when I moved here 50-some years ago, believe me, there were no houses on Middle Cheshire Road. There were very few homes on Butler Road. I was the second house built on Laurel Lane. And I'd tell my kids, when they were driving me crazy, why don't you go jump in the lake for a while, right? So where would they go? They'd get on their bikes, they'd go down Middle Cheshire, Butler Road, and jump in the lake by the schoolhouse. And that's when that woman that lived next door to the RSM property spoke up. Because it's essentially the same type of situation. You're right next to the road. They own property on either side of the road. There's a walkway. It works. I mean, I can tell you, I go by that schoolhouse at times where there's 50 to 75 cars around lining the sides of the road. And for God's sakes, if you can give a marina the ability to park cars on the side of the road, why can't you give it to the town?
Right.
And there's a parking lot there. This
Karen, was that
includes a
Butler-
parking lot.
Was that Butler property on the lake, was it developed, was it built like that, did it have that?
It was exactly like it is now. It didn't have the paved
That was
parking lot.
actually a school, Chuck.
Yep.
And when we were
So that
kids,
landing where people
That was-
sunbathe and
how
the
many
lake,
grades
I
was
was there.
Oh, yeah, that was there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was,
I thought maybe
but
it was
it-
built
it was
rough.
rough,
Mhm.
very rough. And I don't know, there were no stairs
Yeah.
down into the lake
Yeah.
at that time. They put them in
It
later.
shows that, the
And
time
it
you
was
can improve
rocky,
it. And
We-
the same thing
we
applies to
wouldn't
the
do that
RSM
now.
property.
Just-
The RSM property
No,
is
ever
rough.
do that now.
it's a challenge. It's nasty, but it's all that's left.
Yeah,
That's right.
but with some time and money, it can be
Right.
improved.
And
some
that's-
We talked about it
little
with the RSM.
creativity, yeah.
When we were developing it, they were gonna put a switchback trail down to take your kayaks and, I mean, they had all kinds of plans of what they were gonna do. They were gonna
There's-
put docks.
There's potential for low impact use, you know,
Yes.
Yeah.
with a floating dock or
It's
things
not
like
going,
that.
I don't think it'll ever be a swimming area, but it certainly would be really nice for kayaks.
It could
and
be a swimming
canoes.
area. You could do a,
Most
do
people
a,
don't have
do a
yachts.
floating platform.
And you probably could, you
Yeah, I
probably
mean-
could.
It's a challenge, but it's usable,
Yeah.
and like you say, when you've been using the schoolhouse since.
When my kids didn't
when you were
care,
a
the
little
water was
girl.
cold. That was all that they cared
Oh,
about.
I love it. I lived just right off Butler, first house in Fox Ridge Development, and several times after cutting the lawn, I just throw a towel over my shoulder and walk
Yeah,
down,
and walk
and take the
down
car
there.
down. It's like a big in-ground swimming pool that I don't have to clean.
Yeah.
And your property's probably worth a little bit more because you're close by.
Right, right.
Okay, let's put an easement on.
I had a question, I mean, this group feels passionately about it, like others do. I mean, does the group want to have a memo sent to the board?
Make a recommendation, please. I would make that motion.
I
on
would
behalf of-
second it.
On behalf of this group, and we point out that was in the original resolution that there have been at least 4 surveys of people, and one of the leading citizens that respond, in spite of what Yvonne says, the citizens that respond have called for greater access. There are no more parcels, absolutely. I checked with,
Unless some rich person deeds their property to the.
doesn't
town.
matter, they're not there. Danny's not gonna give it to it. The parcels that have 400 or more feet of frontage are never gonna be
They're not gonna be
donated to
there.
the town.
Yeah, I agree.
And the town would be able to afford them.
I think you can say it checks the box on a lot of the parameters that we're looking at in terms of trying to conserve land.
That's true.
It's the last chance to grab a piece of frontage for the rest of the citizens of the town.
Pushback from the neighbor, apart from the adjacent neighbor, but pushback has been because of car traffic and parking? Is that the reason that people
It's
have?
always the
That's
concern.
some of it, yeah.
They say now it's that they're looking into how to, because the cost of it has gone up, because they haven't made a decision, but I'll calm down.
And
So they're looking into ways to finance it. But they have open space fund, they have parks and recreation money, there are probably are grant opportunities. I'm
Yeah.
not sure they're looking,
It almost doesn't matter what it costs, because that's all
right.
there is.
it's not gonna cost $7 million
No.
like the Kellogg property
In the
cost.
Kellogg property, we got pushback from all the NIMBYs that had their piece of the action and had their piece of the lake, and that
Yeah.
dissuaded the town from
Won't that
moving
same,
quickly.
won't the same thing arise with this, or you think, or not?
Possible,
I don't
but again, they're elected to represent the populace, not just the people that whine because somebody might cause them some inconvenience when they're going to their fancy spot.
A little gnat confided in me that there is talk amongst the people that run this town about it benefiting only the Morel development.
Well, they're adjacent, so the schoolhouse has benefited the Weifels Road and the Butler Road.
And the Laurel Lane
Yeah,
people.
Butler Road benefited Fox Ridge.
I mean, really?
That argument went away.
When I was a kid, we lived up on North Main Street, but we'd go out to the schoolhouse, what we call the schoolhouse.
We did. When we first moved to Canandaigua, we lived on Masson Road, and we discovered the schoolhouse before we discovered Kershaw Park.
Yeah, I found Ananda before I found Kershaw.
We didn't know about Ananda. That was before Ananda.
Yeah, true.
There's a motion on the floor with a second.
I second it.
Yes.
And you can't put in in Butler. It's a lovely swimming spot, but you have to drive down to Ananda.
Right, to put your
in
boat in, yeah.
any boats.
To do
And-
a paddle.
Location-wise, it's between the schoolhouse and Ananda.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I had
it's halfway
recommended
between,
that they buy Wendy Logan's place, but the nix on Wendy Logan's place was it was too close to Ananda. They could have bought
I
that
don't
for
remember.
$1.4 million, and she had 300 plus feet of frontage, and that's gone.
And there's certainly canoe places, paddling places in the city that would be supportive. I don't know if that makes, but
It supports our master plan. It's one of the points in the master plan to provide more, to purchase more lakefront property. It supports the health of the lake, because do you know what the alternative is? The alternative is more boats there.
right.
And it supports the needs of the people in a highly populated area of town, which currently doesn't have that. So, and they don't have a lot of swimming pools in Morel development. It's just, it supports,
It's the right thing to do.
it's the right
but-
thing
I
to
call
do.
the question, that's the only thing that I think. As long as you have enough ammunition to write the,
Yes, oh, definitely.
you do, okay.
And I'll put something together and send it back to you guys, so you can say, add this, take that out, change that. And I'd like to put all your names and why I feel like you're important people.
Yeah.
And Kim, would it be fair, Gary, would it be fair to add the ECB's voice to that?
Yeah.
You know, I know that we can't speak for everybody on that group or on the committee, but we certainly could ask. I mean, that's within charge of the
Do a
ECB as well.
separate resolution or a separate.
I would recommend you have a separate vote.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
It needs
good
to be
idea.
the same.
So it wouldn't be a resolution, it would just be an official memo from this team to the town board that would probably go in the reports. If I can get it done before next Wednesday, it can go in the report section on the agenda,
Is there
or Friday, because I make the agendas.
a CIC meeting before the next town board?
There probably is.
I brought that up once, whether the CIC should have made a recommendation.
Yes.
Doug kind of nixed it,
The
didn't he?
6th, I don't know, the 6th of September is the CIC meeting. And the next Monday is the board meeting.
So that wouldn't make it into the,
Not into the agenda. No, we're gonna finalize the agenda on the 2nd.
so someone would have to stand up and give the report.
Not from this group. This one would make it in because we're not
Right.
finalizing the agenda till
But if the
next Friday.
CIC
But if the CIC wanted to, they would have to
Somebody
bring
would
it.
have to stand up and do that. I can do that. You could do that.
Do what?
Stand up and give a report from the CIC.
You need a vote on, we didn't vote yet, or you just consensus?
Consensus is fine. We're not an official committee. I mean, we can if everybody
You
wants
use-
to, but.
And anybody opposed or want to amend
Right, yeah, that's
the
true.
discussion?
Make sure everybody feels.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
well, that
yes,
wasn't on
this
the
will
agenda,
probably
but I
cost
like
you an
it.
extra nickel per thousand on your taxes. People whine about taxes and they're lucky they can pay them.
They should move to Geneva or Victor
Or Rochester.
or Rochester.
So you're thinking about having Barb come in for our next meeting too?
Oh, thank you, yeah. So
great idea.
would you like me to invite her to come?
Sure.
I think it might be worth it.
Yeah, give and take.
It might be, but give her a heads up
Oh, yes.
to do a quickie reconfigure and pull out the size parameter.
Yeah, I'll talk to her about it for a little while and see what she thinks. And if she's amenable and wants to, we'll invite her. If we want to actually spend money on it, I have to, actually, no,
Another thing to
I
put-
don't. It wouldn't be too, as long as it's under $5,000, you can do it without a resolution.
Put a weighting on number of feet of lake frontage
Water
and
frontage, creek
and-
frontage.
a weighting on the tributaries.
Yeah, I feel like that's worth it. You know, we have these stream setbacks and we have, you know, they're there for a reason, and reminding people where that stuff is important.
Need I remind you that the Menteith Creek is not a DEC regulated creek?
It's a blue line stream, but we have only Class C, right?
Class C.
Streams in the town, we don't have any Class A, so.
So what's Menteith, because it's a trout stream.
Yeah, so it's
supposedly.
still Class
Maybe.
C, but it has, which one, yeah, on this map, it's the only
Once
map
in a
that it
while,
shows it
Saw Valley.
as a,
Saying
might have
probably
trout.
reading out.
So what is that, its rating?
It doesn't change the classification of the stream, it's still C, it's just an added
Okay.
factor because those are rare.
But also a factor in that means that the property owners own to the middle of the creek
Yeah.
and to the middle of the waterfall. Which to me is a great opportunity for the town of Canandaigua. Oh, God, I have to ask you how to deal with that.
Okay, I have some marching orders.
I wish there was a way to, and it probably would be a different map, because I think it would confuse things, weight things on like connecting wildlife corridors.
Yeah.
Because that's really what you want to do with the wildlife corridors. you know.
This map in and
So
of
they don't
itself,
cross the road.
Well,
that would be like a way to improve this map.
Yeah.
And keep it as what it is, but improve it, put a little more information on it, yeah, I agree.
Don't we have one that shows, because generally your word wildlife corridors are gonna follow the wooded parcels.
Yeah, that's why they made it separate, but yeah, I did not print the strategic forest protection area map, which I probably should have. But you can kind of see it's similar. It's this one up here. If you kind of glance at your wildlife corridor map and look at this one, you know, they do take into account for wildlife corridors more than just forest land, so it does have more green at the top of it compared to that one. But in the southern portion of the town, it's pretty similar now.
And a lot of it is following creeks, it looks like, too.
Right.
Creeks.
Yeah, because they recognize that creek sides, like the riparian zones, are a little corridor as long as it still has natural cover and it's
The
not
tree
just.
cover provides a whole set of ecological benefits for the soil and the creek itself, keeping it cool and other things.
I do have something I have to do at 11, so before we're over, I just want to recap what I'm supposed to do, so we're all in agreement. So I'm going to talk to Barbara Johnson. I'm going to see if she's available to come to one of our next meetings coming up, which would be September 16th is the third Friday of the month. Alternately, October 21st. Would be the one after that. I'll see if she would be available to come to one of those, talk about these maps, the data behind them, and the potential for creating one or more new maps that would combine and improve the information based on what we all talked about today. And then I'm also going to draft up that memo from our team. I'll reach out to Adeline and I'll copy the rest of the ECB on that email and ask if they would like to lend their support to the same memo, have it maybe come from both groups. I don't know how that works since you didn't talk about it in your meeting, but maybe individual members at least. I don't know.
I think our meeting's early this month. I think it's on the first.
Okay.
Perhaps on homework, everybody look at
Yeah,
this.
so we didn't talk about what I printed out. So I had spoken to Doug, our town manager, Doug Lynch, about, one of the goals of this team, and we talked about it too, is come up with some sort of a program or a policy that kind of says, here's what the town does to preserve land, and here's how we do it, and here's who makes the decisions and how we make those decisions. And Doug's like, we just, and he said, well, maybe we could hire a consultant, maybe we could do that. I was like, we have all the pieces. We already know a lot of what we do. He's like, yeah, but it needs to be put together. He's like, we need a policy. I said, okay, well, let's draft one. So I started putting one together, It's very early. You can see the first page has a lot of text on it and the rest has a lot of bullets. Maybe at the meeting that Barbara Johnston does not come to, which whether that's September or October, we can look at this. And until then, yeah, feel free to look through it. What I did was I looked at all of our other town policies and tried to see kind of how they're set up. Basically, it tells the town board what to do in certain situations. That's what our policies do, or our department heads. It tells us how to operate. And I figured the questions you would need to answer is, why do we want to preserve land? How do we define it? And then what do we look at in order to decide how to do it? And obviously all these maps are listed as what to look at, which is why it'd be nice to simplify them. And then how can you do it? Do you buy it? That's one way. Do you put an easement on it? That's another way. Someone might donate an easement. That's another way. And then how much is it going to cost? Are we having to put the bill entirely on our own when we purchase it? Or sometimes you actually purchase an easement too? Or can we get grant money and that kind of thing? So a lot of this isn't new information. It's just putting it together in a document that says, here's what we do as a town. This is our policy. And it's something that we would want the town board to adopt. And then moving forward, if we're faced with a choice, we can say, well, it's in our policy. We followed the policy. This is the recommendation. This is what you should do.
Here, let's make sure we don't lose the track of concern I know that I have, and I know the planning board has, regarding conservation easements as to who maintains them and
Yes.
how they be maintained.
So it depends on who holds the easement, right? So much of our easements that we have for farmland, the land trust holds, we only have one that the town holds. And when I say holds an easement, that means that's the party who's responsible for making sure that the rules are followed. So that ends up being whoever
But I'm
holds
talking
it.
about the proliferation of HOAs that are now.
Okay, and so those are easements, but that depends on who is the easement holder on those too. So if the HOA is
Gotta
the
come up with
easement,
these policies.
So conservation
Yeah.
subdivisions you're talking about, or?
In a conservation subdivision, or if the planning board requires a
yeah,
conservation
so like when an
easement.
HOA owns, it has the property and owns it themselves, the open space in a neighborhood, they're in control of it. They are responsible for doing whatever it is that they are supposed to do according to their deed. But for, I think, the new one off of,
Piercebrook,
yeah, the town's gonna hold that easement, right? Or are we owning?
HOA,
Okay,
town didn't want it,
okay.
and that's the issue you're in. If the
Now, is
town
the
doesn't take
HOA
it,
gonna own it too?
they're gonna own it.
Is it gonna have a conservation easement on it?
Yes.
Okay, so they'll be in control of it.
So what happens if the HOA doesn't do their part of the bargain?
Depends. I
Who
mean,
who oversees the HOA?
There's still a deed restriction that cedes whoever owns it.
right.
The town
So,
does have the right to come in.
Worst comes to worst, it'll just turn into a weed plat.
Well,
So say, for example, say, just for argument's sake, say you had a neighborhood like that and the HOA owned a parcel of open space that they left and they weren't gonna build on it. And say an easement on that land was given to the town. So if the town held that easement, that would mean that the town could say, well, you can't do that. We hold
They
the
can
easement. We're
enforce it.
responsible. You have to do this, this, and this because that's what your easement language says. But if it's their land that they own and there's no easement on it and the deed just says, it remains open, then that's it.
Well, the
was
planning board puts a restriction on the
And I
commonly
think
owned
there is a
property.
provision
Yeah.
if the HOA drops the ball, that the town has the right to come in and
To
do whatever
to
has to be
enforce it,
done, and then
and
lien the property.
no matter what, if the
Civil.
town doesn't enforce it, it's still a perpetual restriction on the property.
So like
So-
with our farmland, the single one that we hold the easement on is still privately owned land. It's not accessible to the public and they farm it. So once a year, and our first storm's coming up, I have to plan it for this fall. I or one of our code enforcement officers, or maybe together, will go out and we'll go and see what it looks like. We took pictures last year when we obtained the easement and we wrote a report, and we would go out and compare current status with what was true at the time that we got the easement and make sure everything's still fine. There are some changes they're allowed to make. If they'd made any, we'd make sure they were under, what they were allowed, and then we would do that every year, which is what the land trust does for the ones they hold. The land trust also holds an easement on town-owned property off of Middle Cheshire Road. They monitor that. They have a visit to that every year,
Is
and
that
they
the
send us.
wetlands?
Yeah, they send us a letter talking about what, their annual visit. So it's, there's, with conservation easements, there's supposed to be annual monitoring, ongoing, forever.
So if the land trust owns the easement, is that land accessible to
All depends
anyone
on-
other than the
All
land?
depends on what the landowner,
Okay,
Right,
so
it
like.
depends on
like
what the easement language says.
Vista one, there's trails there and they allow
Yeah.
people to use the trails.
Correct.
And that's the intention with the one on Middle Cheshire Road, to eventually have trails through there?
Potentially, it's a wetland though, you can't.
Yeah, I understand
So
that, yeah.
you can't just put trails through there. If
But
anyone
it's
ever
actually a
wanted
beautiful
to,
piece of property.
you'd need to do like boardwalks
There-
over the
then
wetland and
that's-
stuff
yeah.
like that.
So the Vista, the land trust has primary responsibility for, the
Yes.
town does not have to
No,
maintain trails.
the town provided financial support
Right.
for it, but the land trust, it's a combination of ownership. They own a lot of it, and
Yeah.
there's some conservation easements on land that's not owned by them that makes up the Vista project. They're fully responsible for the land they own and for the easements they hold that make up the park itself. The only thing we do is that, yes, we gave them financial support at the beginning, and now we will also be plowing it in the winter. We'll plow the parking lot. We have an agreement with them
Yeah.
for that.
That was a great.
Do we have
great acquisition.
conservation easements that are not open to the public?
Yes, the Purdy easement for the farmland.
The farmland, yeah.
Right.
Oh, they're,
Is that the only?
the conservation is they're not gonna develop it, that's
Correct.
essentially what.
It's just protecting
They're
the
not opening
farmland to
up
keep
for
it
a recreational
from
purpose.
turning into anything else, right?
I know with Pierce Brook, we required that it be accessible to the public, the conservation easement that Pierce Brook has, their HOA, because Miller Park's right across the street.
Right, that was
So-
one of the
Mhm.
factors that went into.
That would be open to the public.
Yeah, so if you guys could take a look at that, we'll
Okay,
talk
sure.
about it at a future meeting,
Yep.
but you can at least see, get a feel for if you like where this is going. Obviously, it's probably gonna change a little bit. But look for an email from me in the next couple of business days with a draft memo. I'd like to wrap it up by next Wednesday or Thursday at the latest, so we can get it on the agenda as
Thumbs
a
up,
report.
thumbs down, or change it. Revise it.
Yeah, if you're, I don't
suggest
know if, everybody likes to edit in their own way, but I'll send it as a Word document with the review button turned on, so that if you can write right in it and then save it and email it back to me, and it'll show, or you can handwrite and leave it for
I'll talk to you
me
more
physically
about
too.
So next meeting is the
private
16th
conservation easements.
September, right?
Thanks.
Oops, sorry, I lost my calendar. Yeah, so our next meeting is scheduled to be on the 16th of September. I see no reason why we won't be able to make it. It should be, thank you, Kim.
Yep.
Oh, thanks.
At 10 a.m. And I'll let you know if Barbara Johnson will be coming to that one. If she is, that'll be our topic. If she's not, we can talk about the policy. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great.
Sure,
Thanks.
quick question, I know you have to go. Is there any, if I wanted to find out more information about the little parcel on the lake, if I went to the town board webpage, is
Yes.
there any documentation or discussion about it?
Yes.
I can read?
So a few years ago, you probably remember, we had, it was probably right during COVID, or maybe it was the January after that, I can't remember, but that's when the option agreement that's currently set to expire in September was created, for that parcel. So there was a lot of documentation about the parcel itself, about potential ideas for future use by the town if we acquired it, all kinds of stuff. And so if you go to the website and you look at the headings, there's one that says projects. If you click on it, there's gonna be a blue bubble that says lakefront land acquisition. Under that heading, there will be information on the parcel that we called Titchener Point, but there's also information about the parcel on County Road 16, I forget the number, 39 something or other, the address, but it's what we also
3950
Thank
County
you.
Road 16.
3950. We also call it RSM because that was the old project name back when they were gonna develop it.
What was the other name of it?
RSM. I don't know if that's how we have it titled on the website, probably not, but the address that Karen just mentioned is the heading on that page, and there's all kinds of stuff. There's the public comment information on
Yeah, all
it.
the comments.
There's a couple presentations, at least one that's the one where Doug put together, well, what would we do with this parcel if we owned it? Well, and he had talked with our then parks coordinator and others about, potential use. How could you use it? It's so small, it's so steep. Well, here's some ideas. And he had a presentation on that. There was some appraisal information. There's all kinds of stuff on there.
Okay, yeah, it'd be great to read that.
It starts from 2016 with the RSM 15 slip dock alignment, and then authorization for the option agreement, then the resolution for a public hearing, then option agreement to purchase, the meeting with residents, then meeting with the Canday Lake watershed, and then the presentation from the supervisor this past.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot.
The Johnson Homestead? Is it Johnson?
I think that's the name, yeah.
I might be
The
under
old,
that too.
the old home.
So it includes the house across the street, and there is actually a parking area across the street.
There was a
from-
proposed parking area, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
from the property, and there's also a land for a trail to go up to Lakeside Meadows, is that the name of it?
I think so, yeah, there was a narrow strip that went up to the top of the hill
Goes up to the top of the hill.
to try and make a connection.
Is it open to the public if I just want to get in the car, hop on my bike, go take a look, or is it
It's
private?
privately owned.
But
You can drive
but you-
by.
Yeah, you can
But-
drive by, if you go by German Brothers Marina, there's the driveway that goes up on the right-hand side and it's blocked off, well,
Yeah.
that's the Johnson property. And right across the street, it's got a guardrail across the
There's
whole
a-
frontage. That's the frontage.
That's the lake. It's a small area, but yeah, no, you
Small,
can't
steep.
walk on it. It's
Take your
private.
kayak, go right
Yeah,
down.
try it out.
Yeah,
Running
right.
start.
You might see
Yeah.
it better from your kayak,
Throw it over the
actually.
guardrail.
Just- And then slide down the
Go
hill.
to it.
I'm thinking boogie board now.
Ski board.
Right.
Oh.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Right.
I'll be in communication. I think this was a great meeting. There was a lot of good discussions.
Good.
That RSM lot also abutted